Welcome to your deep dive into the JFK assassination. You've really gone deep down the rabbit hole with this one. You've sent us everything, witness testimonies, articles on alternative theories. You even sent us excerpts from Dealey Plaza journals. Really obscure ones, too. I'm already sensing some serious twists and turns ahead.
Yeah, it's clear you're really looking beyond the surface here, digging into those details that people don't always look at, details that can make all the difference in a case like this.
Exactly. And there are a few things that really jumped out at me, like the mystery around the paper bag that Oswald supposedly used to carry the rifle. And then there's this Igor Vaganov character. Did you know about him before?
Oh, Vaganov. He's an intriguing figure for sure. We'll get to him. But first, to really understand all this material, we need to ground ourselves in the setting. So imagine it's November 22nd, 1963. You're in Dealey Plaza, a busy traffic hub in downtown Dallas.
Okay, I'm picturing it. What was the layout like?
Okay, so think of a triangle. Elm, Houston, and Commerce Streets. With that infamous triple underpass on the western edge, you've got the Texas School Book Depository overlooking Elm Street, the Daltex building across the street, and several other key buildings, like the Records Building and the Criminal Courts Building. All these locations factor into the events of that day. And here's a detail that might surprise you. There were no sidewalks along Main Street.
No sidewalks. Why is that important?
Yeah, it might seem like a small detail, but it becomes relevant when you start tracing the movements of witnesses and potential shooters. Okay, now that we have the scene set, let's dive into this paper bag mystery. Your research highlights a lot of conflicting accounts from the people who were actually there.
Yeah, this is where things get really weird. You've got Detective John Hicks and Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig. They both say they never saw a bag. And then you have Lieutenant J.C. Day. He's giving a super detailed description of the bag, almost like he was expecting the question.
It doesn't stop there. Detective Richard Sims mentions a wrapper, but then it vanishes from his testimony later on. Detective Marvin Johnson claims he saw the bag after his partner unfolded it. But then his partner, Detective L.D. Montgomery, says that's not what happened at all.
Wait, so multiple people are claiming to have interacted with this bag, but their stories don't line up. It's like a game of telephone gone wrong.
Right, and to make things even more suspicious, Detective Robert Studebaker, the guy in charge of photographing the sniper's nest, admits he never took a picture of the bag.
Didn't photograph it. But that seems like such a crucial piece of evidence.
You would think so, right? And it gets even stranger. Studebaker, who only had a couple months of experience photographing crime scenes, ends up drawing an outline of the bag on a photograph for the FBI. The whole thing just seems incredibly sloppy. Or maybe not intentional.
Okay, so we have all these conflicting accounts, and the one person who should have photographed the bag didn't. What are we supposed to make of this? Was there even a bag?
The lack of clear, consistent evidence around something as basic as a paper bag is baffling. The sheer volume of conflicting testimonies points towards either a colossal failure in the investigation or a deliberate attempt to muddy the waters. And if we can't be certain about the bag, how can we be certain about how the rifle got into the building? This really throws a wrench into the single shooter theory.
It definitely raises more questions than it answers. It's like the more you look at this paper bag situation, the less sense it makes.
Exactly. The mystery of the paper bag, and therefore the rifle itself, opens the door for exploring alternative scenarios. And that's where Igor Vaganov enters the picture. You highlighted some pretty striking parallels between him and Oswald.
Okay, Igor Vaganov, from what I'm gathering from your research, he's like Oswald's mysterious doppelganger. They're both Russian-speaking, both new to Dallas, and they both allegedly had a rifle and revolver. That can't be just a coincidence, can it?
It's definitely a series of parallels, one that warrants a closer look. Both men even had contact with the FBI, and both left their homes shortly after the assassination. It's almost too strange to be true. And when you consider Vaganov's activities leading up to his arrival in Dallas, things get even more suspicious. He takes this cross-country road trip with odd stops, including this strange encounter with a man in Oklahoma who calls him Vince.
Hold on, Vince. That's nowhere close to Igor. What was he doing on this road trip?
That's the million-dollar question. And to add another layer of intrigue, when Vaganov is later apprehended, they find a torn King of Spades playing card and a cryptic note with a phone number and names in his coat pocket.
It's like something straight out of a spy movie. So what are we thinking here? Was Vaganov some kind of alternate patsy? Was he meant to take the fall if Oswald hadn't?
It's a fascinating theory, and one that your research seems to support. Think about it. Vaganov leaves a good job in Pennsylvania, relocates to Dallas, can't find work, is carrying a rifle, then disappears right after the assassination, ditching his rifle along the way. It's certainly a sequence of events that raises eyebrows.
It definitely seems like he was involved in something shady. But to what extent? We may never know the full story. This is getting really deep. You know what else is a head-scratcher? All these accounts from witnesses who claim they saw wounds on the left side of JFK's head, but the official reports only focus on the right side.
Yeah, the location of those head wounds. It's been a point of contention for decades. And it's not just random bystanders who remember seeing wounds on the left. Several medical professionals who treated JFK that day also recall seeing them.
Like Dr. Marion T. Jenkins, he initially reported seeing a wound on JFK's left temple, but then, after a private conversation with the Warren Commission, he changed his story.
That sounds super fishy to me. It's certainly suspicious. And he's not the only medical professional who observed left-side wounds. Dr. Robert N. McClelland, a surgeon at Parkland Hospital, specifically wrote in his admission notes that JFK's cause of death was a gunshot wound to the left temple. These are trained medical professionals. Their observations carry a lot of weight.
And there are even more first-hand accounts, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Adolf H. Geisek, who worked at the Bethesda Naval Hospital, remembers a large portion of the cranium missing on the left side of JFK's head. Father Oscar L. Huber, the priest who gave JFK his last rites, even told the press he saw a wound over JFK's left eye. It's hard to dismiss so many eyewitness accounts.
It's almost like there was an effort to downplay or erase evidence of these left-side wounds. But why?
The implications are huge. If the official narrative about the direction of the fatal shot is wrong, it blows the single-shooter theory wide open.
Whoa. Okay, before my brain melts from all these conspiracies, let's move on to something a little less heavy. I noticed you flagged some info about the Patsy Paschall film. You know, most people only know about the Zapruder film, but this one seems just as important.
It's definitely an overlooked piece of the puzzle. While the Zapruder film captures the assassination itself, the Paschall film offers a unique view of the moments leading up to it. Filmed from the third floor of the old Red Courthouse, it shows the motorcade as it turns onto Houston Street and then Elm Street, and there's a strange cut in the film. That coincides with the discrepancy in the timing of the motorcade.
A cut? What do you mean?
Well, right after the motorcade turns onto Elm, there's a jump in the film, and the timing between the fifth and sixth cars seems off. This lines up with footage taken by an NBC cameraman, Dave Weigman. His footage actually shows the sixth car in the motorcade coming to a complete stop just before the grassy knoll. It's during this pause that things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happens?
During that pause, while the sixth car is stopped, Paschall's film captures movement behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll.
Movement. Like someone hiding or getting into position.
It's impossible to say for sure from the footage alone, but it's definitely suspicious activity in a key location at a crucial moment.
And Miss Patsy Paschall, what happened to her? Did she ever talk about her film?
That's another odd part of this whole story. Paschall never spoke to the Warren Commission or the FBI about her film. It wasn't until 1978 that the House Select Committee on Assassinations finally subpoenaed it. She even expressed fears for her safety if she came forward with the film earlier.
Wow, so this film was basically buried for years. And it potentially shows someone lurking behind the picket fence right before the assassination. That's huge.
It is. And this isn't the only evidence. That suggests something was happening on the grassy knoll. Spectrographic analysis of a dictabelt recording from the Dallas Police Department indicates that a shot was fired from near the picket fence.
So we have this film that shows suspicious movement behind the picket fence, and then scientific analysis that supports a shot being fired from that location. It all seems to line up.
It does. And yet, the official investigation largely ignored the Paschall film and the possibility of a shot from the grassy knoll. It makes you wonder what else might have been overlooked or deliberately dismissed.
It's like the pieces of a puzzle are finally starting to come together, but there are still some missing pieces that could change the whole picture. This deep dive is getting more intense by the minute.
It's true. But we're making progress. Let's keep digging. There's still so much to uncover.
Feels like we've uncovered enough evidence to fuel a dozen conspiracy theories already, and we're not even done yet. You included some really fascinating excerpts from this Dealey Plaza Echo research journal. There's one article in particular that really caught my eye. It's Fun and Games in New Orleans. What's that all about?
Ah, yes, that article. It dives into a legal battle over access to Jim Garrison's investigative files. Garrison was the district attorney of New Orleans, and one of the few officials who publicly challenged the Warren Commission's findings.
Right. He even brought charges against a businessman named Clay Shaw, claiming he was involved in a conspiracy to assassinate JFK. The article focuses on this dispute between the Assassination Records Review Board and the New Orleans District Attorney at the time, Harry Connick Sr., over those files.
Yet Connick claimed that many of Garrison's files were missing. He even went so far as to accuse Garrison's staff of theft. But then, a former member of Connick's staff, a man named Gary Raymond, comes forward with a bombshell revelation.
Hey, what happened?
Raymond claimed that he was personally ordered by Connick to destroy those very files. Not only that, he eventually handed over a portion of the files to the Records Review Board, proving that they did in fact exist.
Wow, so Connick was caught red-handed, basically trying to cover up evidence? This is insane.
It is. And it gets even wilder. A journalist, Richard Angelico, confronts Connick with this information on live television. Connick basically admits to destroying records, claiming he was just cleaning house. The whole thing is a bizarre spectacle that raises serious questions about what those files contained and why Connick was so desperate to keep them hidden.
It's like every time we pull on a thread, we unravel another layer of intrigue. Speaking of intrigue, there's another article from the Dealey Plaza Echo that I wanted to discuss. It's an interview with Roger Craig, a former Dallas County deputy sheriff, who was present during Oswald's interrogation.
Roger Craig. Now, he's a fascinating figure. He always maintained that Oswald was part of a larger conspiracy. And he pointed to a particular remark Oswald made during his interrogation as proof.
What did Oswald say?
During the interrogation, Oswald reportedly said, "Everybody will know who I am now." The article's author, Hal Verb, argues that this statement suggests Oswald was more than just a lone gunman.
I see what you mean. It's like he was anticipating becoming infamous, which wouldn't make sense if he truly believed he was acting alone.
Right. Craig believed that Oswald was part of something bigger, and that his cover had been blown. He saw Oswald as a patsy, who was set up to take the fall. And this ties back into our discussion about the paper bag. If Oswald truly brought the rifle into the building in a bag, why would he need to be part of a larger conspiracy?
That's a good point. It's like all of these seemingly separate threads, they're starting to weave together into a much larger tapestry.
It's true. And the more we look at the evidence, the more we see that the official narrative doesn't quite hold up. There are just too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions.
Okay, I have to ask about this next article. A Flight of Fancy. What is that all about?
That article. It delves into a peculiar detail about Oswald's supposed defection to the Soviet Union in 1959. The Warren Commission concluded that it would have been impossible for Oswald to make the connecting flight from London to Helsinki and check into his hotel before midnight, as hotel records indicate.
So there's a discrepancy in the timeline.
Exactly. This discrepancy has led some researchers to believe that Oswald had outside help, possibly from intelligence agencies. They argue that the official timeline was deliberately manipulated to fit a predetermined narrative.
Hold on, so they're saying the CIA might have tampered with evidence.
It's a bold claim, but it's not entirely unfounded. The author of the article, Chris Mills, he actually uncovered evidence of alternative flight routes that Oswald could have taken, routes that would fit the timeline. And here's where it gets interesting. The CIA was asked to investigate these alternative flight routes back in 1964, but their findings were never fully disclosed.
That seems super shady. What were they trying to hide? Were there other individuals on those flights who were connected to Oswald or the assassination?
It's impossible to say for sure, but the lack of transparency definitely fuels suspicion that there's more to the story than we've been told.
You know, this entire deep dive has been a wild ride. We've explored conflicting testimonies, mysterious figures, and evidence that seems to have been deliberately obscured. I'm starting to see why so many people are fascinated by the JFK assassination. It's like a puzzle that will never truly be solved.
It's a case that continues to captivate and confound us, even decades later. And it speaks to a larger truth. Sometimes, the official narrative is just the tip of the iceberg. The real story lies beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered.
Well, you've certainly given me a lot to think about. I'm not sure I'll ever look at a paper bag the same way again.
It's those seemingly insignificant details that often hold the key to unlocking a larger mystery.
Well said. We've only scratched the surface of these materials. What will you discover as you keep digging? That's something for you to ponder. And if you uncover anything interesting, be sure to share it with us. Until next time, keep exploring and keep those questions coming.